Well, hello there, West in the world. It is Thursday afternoon, September the 24th, and this morning we wrapped up our discussion of the Protestant Reformation and Catholic Reform. In class, the trajectory of our conversation was really fairly simple. We talked about, beyond Lutheranism, we talked about three additional branches of the Protestant Reformation that sprang out of this fragmenting of Christendom. And those branches, we said, were the Anabaptist tradition, led by men like Menno Simons, the Calvinist tradition, which of course you had read about in your homework, and led by John Calvin, becomes a major branch of the Reformation. And then thirdly, the Anglican or Church of England tradition, which we said is distinctive because it is motivated less by questions of theology and more by pragmatic questions of politics and the desires of King Henry VIII of England. The branches of Protestantism will, of course, over time continue to proliferate, but it is those few basic ideas that we talked about: sola fides, sola scriptura, the priesthood of all believers, the practice of 2 sacraments rather than 7, that will continue to define that tradition really right down to the present time. It is also, we said, the great contribution of Protestantism to increase literacy rates, the emphasis on the reading of Scripture, and the continued development of the self, which has transformational effects in the West in general. We then turned our attention to the question of Catholic reform. What are Catholics doing in light of the challenges of this era? And we talked about some internal reformers, men like St. Ignatius of Loyola, whose work you read a little bit of, and St. Teresa of Avila, and sort of compared or put that in some ways in contrast to the reactionary movement of the popes of this age, the Council of Trent, the foundation of the Inquisition, the Index of Prohibited Books, to say that there is some positive movement towards reform within the Catholic tradition, and at the same time there is this sort of negative response, this reaction against the challenge of Protestantism. I think maybe as much as anything, if there was a kind of singular takeaway from today's discussion, it was the close ties between religious identity and the political affairs of the state. That the questions of religion are very much political questions in this era, and not just in the case of England. But we talked at the end about the wars of religion that spring up out of this splintering of Christendom, and whether it's the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre in France, or the defeat of the Spanish Armada by the English in 1588, these are manifestations of a greater sort of unrest, and a fairly destructive consequence of the Reformation. They also point in the direction of growing state power, that where Europe had been a place very much defined by religious identity through the Middle Ages, the Europe we're going to begin tracking with from this point forward, starting with some conversation about absolute monarchy on Tuesday, is a Europe that is very much dominated by state identity and by the functions of kings and the relationship between them and people who live under their rule. So look forward to talking more with you about those questions next week. Hope you have a good weekend. See you on Tuesday.